Last time I spoiled that the presumed Almighty was in fact Orgodemir in disguise. This wasn't problematic yet. Something I left out so far was that you had a celebration after restoring the Almighty. So back in your hometown everyone was cheerful, celebrating the return because it sounded good. And during that celebration, just a bit before meeting the Almighty, you decided to become a fisherman and, to quote Mervyn, lay down your sword. But now, after meeting the one pretending to be the Almighty, you are forced to change your mind, and you have one more adventure to go on. This time not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. You see, right after returning, the island you grew up on suffers the same fate that you witnessed from the outside on so many others. The sky darkens, monsters flood the island, and it's sealed away from the rest of the world. And nobody knows why. People blame all kinds of things, trying to find a pattern in the senseless suffering that Orgodemir inflicts as an end in itself. The feeling of being God-forsaken fills all the NPCs you encounter in this stretch of the game. They have an identity crisis and feel betrayed, now that seemingly the Almighty has returned, but still allows or even causes such suffering. Your father has gone missing and is presumed dead. The king of Astard is in a coma. So the two main authorities are gone. Nobody else is there for the people. So after coming of age in the hours upon hours leading up to this, you aren't pass the torch, but you pick up the scraps. Not because an authority over you decided that the time is ripe. Not because, like in so many events so far, the NPC of the day tells you what to do, but out of necessity. The opposite happens, and NPCs tell you that you should stay inside town away from danger. And this is something you've heard many times before, and will hear in all the other locations you visit in this section. Orgodemir uses fear to keep people sheltered. The only way to combat that is to go exit town, exit your safe zone. And what sets you apart is that you are willing and able to do so. That doesn't mean you're entirely on your own though. You do have your party members. On the island, Mervyn also sees herself as forced to help you and to, after behaving for so long, once again rebel against her mother. One of the only places to investigate is the Shrine of Mysteries, but you will find it disabled. At this point, the NPC to guide you through this calamity turns out to be Sir Mervyn, who is able to contact you through the main statue that was so many hours ago the key to opening up the door to the shrine and thus the adventure as a whole. He explains to you that Orgodemir used the pretense of some islands being evil to seal away the ones with elemental spirits, parts of the Almighty that have the power to expose him. Your goal for now is to travel to each of them, and to do that, first things first, you need to rekindle 4 shrines that represent each element, each housing a portal that before now only served as a redundant fast travel option with the exception of the water one. The shrines require the fire from Emberdale, but luckily you can get some elsewhere. If you remember, you lit the beacon in the Buckingham event with said flames, so while you can't go yourself, Mervyn, who hid away in Buckingham, can do so for you. And at this point, for the only time in the game, Dragon Quest 7 takes the control away from the main character and you play as Sir Mervyn. Sir Mervyn has always been more independent than the other party members, not connected to the others by a shared motivation, but only a shared goal, bringing down Orgodemir. He's definitely part of the party, but as we can see here, he functions on his own. To such a high degree that he can venture down the Den of the Dwarfs, get permission from the King of Buckingham to enter the beacon, journey all the way up to the guiding light and set a sacred flame to the sealed away island of Astard. In the scene where he's not communicating through the statue, he's represented by a light, very similar to the Almighty short before the fight against Orgodemir. In a sense, Sir Mervyn is now exhibiting holy powers that rival the Almighty himself. Of course, he is humble beyond reason, but it's noteworthy because the point that the Almighty isn't that far beyond normal humans is an important one. And now, since the portal that was reactivated was the one to Emberdale, it's time for the 5th visit there. Up until now, even when Emberdale was on the verge of destruction, the people were blissfully unaware. This is the first time we see it in a state of despair, at least relatively so. Like all the places that house an elemental spirit, it's been sealed away. The sky was darkened, monsters are able to invade the town, and the lava in the volcano has retracted to a much lower level. While this means that the water is no longer warm and everyone's freezing, this also allows you to go to a deeper level of the volcano together with the town's seer. She brings you everything you need to progress and guides you. You might have gone off on your own this time, but in Dragon Quest 7, you by yourself don't amount to quite so much, and the NPCs from each event, starting with Kiefer at the very beginning, are all heroes in their own right, and vital to your adventure. But more on that in the video on the ending. When you reach the end of the dungeon, she calls her mate over to bring an item, and while you wait, she tells you that the 4 elemental spirits are fragments of the Almighty, and you're there to reawaken the fire spirit. Which you do, but when you meet the fire spirit you might be very disappointed. He confirms that he doesn't know what the father of the flames the people of Emmerdale have been worshipping him by is, and he knows nothing about the situation. None of their prayers reached him. He knows nothing about how dire the situation is, so before listening to you he wants to fight you in order to see whether you were worthy, as if the strong were the ones who needed divine help the most. And to top it off, he turns out to be quite weak, and after beating him, when he decides to help you, he attempts to do so but fails. He tries to unseal Emmerdale, return light, but straight up fails. So you are tasked to find the other elemental spirits, but without telling you, he does you one more favor by melting the ice encasing the Sea Dragon, Captain Sharkeye's ship. And unlike the deity, they will be of much help. So while Emmerdale isn't saved yet, you still leave the people to fend for themselves and move on. In your hometown, the people have discovered Captain Sharkeye's ship and sent out an expedition. You do go with them, and this marks the first time you set out on an expedition on the ship that you weren't allowed to go on during the intro sequence. Your father isn't there for it though, but he is alive and will soon come home. He did almost die out at sea, but Captain Sharkeye's crew saved him. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Before you interact with anyone in the crew, you fail boarding the ship and almost drown. This turns out to be a blessing in disguise though, since it allows you to see more visions, one of which features Captain Sharkeye doubting himself. The mark on his arm isn't complete, he might not have the full blessing of the water spirit. He also talks about one of his dreams, which, given what we know about people marked by the spirit, may very well have been a vision. He saw his child taking the helm of his ship in his place, and while it isn't clear how many generations you are apart from Captain Sharkeye, you are soon going to be the first new person in centuries to take control of the ship. But back to reality. You wake up in the ship and soon have an audience with Captain Sharkeye himself, who then, after you show him the sea serpent saber the King of Buckingham gifted to you, which confirms that you are who you claim to be, wants to speak to you man to man as he puts it, meaning he sees you as an equal. He then spots your mark, acknowledging you as his descendant. At this moment, most likely because the 2 fragments of the whole mark of the water spirit that you 2 bear were brought together, the water spirit channels her voice through the sea serpent saber and calls out to you to also save the others, the earth and wind spirit, and only then reawaken her, and she lights up the 2 shrines holding the portals to reach said spirits. I find it interesting that the water spirit lights the divine flames instead of the fire one, but she is definitely shown to be the most important one in every way. So now Captain Sharkeye gives you control over the Sea Dragon, and after maybe a short trip to the Old Trades Abbey, which was also sealed away in the Steeper Despair, you can choose to reawaken the next 2 spirits in any order you like. I'll be covering the wind spirit first, and as you might expect, that results in a trip to Aeolus Vale. The people there did a good job remembering the first calamity that hit them, but now their poems about it are so reflective of their current situation that some people even assume that they were prophetic. This is of course strong foreshadowing that Orgodemir is in fact back, but it also shows another bit of distortion of history. In this specific case, the old poem finds a new purpose, a new application and a new interpretation. The thoughts and feelings that led the author to write the poem are timeless. But that's not the focus, there are more pressing matters. And despite that, the town's new mayor hasn't shown herself throughout the entire affair. She only does so when you arrive in the town, revealing that she grew wings like the Sirius of old and announcing a curfew. Once again, you're the only one able to venture beyond the boundaries of town, in this case to escort the mayor to a nearby tower that wasn't there in the past. Ever since she sprouted wings, she felt a pull towards it. So at the top, the ghost of Fidelia, the child that never had wings in the first visit, appears, who reveals that it is her wings that now rest on the mayor's shoulders. She was denied them so that now the mayor could have them, but it wasn't a choice made by the wind spirit or the Almighty. They were denied by fate, seemingly by chance. And now the wings are used to transport you up to the ancestral home of the Sirius, a giant cube floating above. The specifics are that the Zeros split into two groups, the ones that kept living in this ancestral home and the ones that ventured out into the world below to expand their horizons. The second branch, the ones that had human curiosity over many years, would eventually become regular humans, arguably more human than the ones up above who kept their wings. The way to bring back the wind spirit is to combine two treasures, a statue and a vestment, and each group of Zeros were granted one of them. The statue remains below where it was on the first visit, but the monster took the treasure from the Zeros up above. Not after the Demon Lord's revival, but long before, and was sealed inside the dungeon that the vestment was initially kept in. So someone gives you the key to open up the dungeon, a really cool one by the way. You go through it, fight the monster that stole the clothing, bring it back to the world below and revive the wind spirit. But she doesn't even want to help you initially. Not out of a conviction like the fire spirit, but because she's lazy and she demands 5 years worth of man. Fill in what exactly that means yourself to be given to her. She only decides to help you when she finds out how bad the situation really is. And like the fire spirit, I swear that if these were the personalities of bosses you fought, people would make theory videos or posts about how they represent deadly sins. Like the fire spirit would be pride or wrath because he doesn't listen to weak people and he fights you for no good reason, and if we went with that, the wind spirit would be sloth and lust. Notably in the PSX version, Aisha calls her a slut, and that version also sees her calling herself a slave girl. It's a mess. These are the deities that everyone's been worshipping and turning to when everything seemed lost. These are the deities that weren't there for anyone and you instead had to step in and save the day time and time again. So now you have two misfits and are ready to get the next, or in this case a little less of a misfit. You visit Al-Balad and the nearby temple that is now being heavily patrolled by guards. And this is where you want to reawaken the earth spirit, who unlike the others isn't awoken from a statue of a likeness or a god-given flame, but to awaken the spirit of the land a human has to draw him in the land. And while one old guy remembers most of it, he forgot the face, and now you need to recover this lost knowledge. Or at least that's what it's framed as. In reality there's also parts he simply didn't have, but either way the queen sends you down a sealed chamber where you solve some puzzles to find gemstones that represent each part of the earth spirit's face. She also mentions that she gave the other eye of the Sphinx to the Almighty, same as you did when you visited the Cathedral of Light. Apparently they had enough power to return the revived Orgodemir to full power or even beyond. If you remember from the Al-Balad event, those gems are implied to have been powered by human prayers. So once again the core issue as well as the power stems from humanity themselves. And the only ones who can fix these issues are humans as well. There's a side story about one guy that kinda looks like Hadid who is really virtuous and his 3 brothers, all children of the Al-Balad Elder, who are basically 3 small Prince Charmless prototypes. Weak, cowardly, yet still arrogant and selfish. It's something that has a message we've heard so often, that people are flawed and annoying, but even so they're still worth saving, which you at one point do. So I'm going to leave out basically everything surrounding them and instead focus on the Hadid lookalike. He's the most capable of becoming the next village elder, and while he wouldn't want his siblings to become elder in his stead, since they would be likely to ruin Al-Balad, he still doesn't want to become elder himself. He wants to be like you and go out there adventuring. His hut, besides his cats that he deeply cares for, has books about being an adventurer, and when you end up saving the day he will. But for now his duty comes before that. At least he gets just a small taste of adventure, restoring the earth spirit. So you do just that, and the earth spirit is the most like what you'd expect. He's there to help and goes and protects his people. How exactly he does so is unclear, but it's already a much greater help than the other spirits. Arguably he's made by human hand, drawn by a human, and maybe that's why he doesn't look down on them as inferior like the fire spirit and doesn't objectify them like the wind spirit. And thus, with all the other spirits reawoken, you go back to the Sea Dragon and sail for the water spirit. But there's no town assigned to her, no quest. You simply hold up the Sea Serpent Saber and a beam of light guides you to Rainbow Cove, a location with holy water that has saved you twice before from a black flame. And there, without you doing anything, the Sea Serpent Saber splits the ocean and reawakens the water spirit who lies at the bottom of it. Interestingly, unlike the others, she knows what's been going on. She doesn't need a briefing, and she claims to have always been watching over you instead of asking who you even are. And notably, you don't need to reassemble her body like with the others, but she already has it intact. She's the closest thing the game has to a deity. If we are looking at all the spirits, there's an important question that comes to mind. Why were they sleeping at all? They were often technically protecting the people around them. For example, the fire spirit's flames may have been protecting Emberdale, or that pot protecting Albalat because of the earth spirit's power, but that was never enough. They weren't actually there for the people, and they would have all died without your intervention. But it's only an assumption that they ever wanted to protect the people. They just govern over an element. The earth spirit has this hard trial set up. You need to fight the fire spirit, and the wind spirit takes payment. None of them are willing to help the needy just for the sake of helping. They are inhumane, which makes sense. This goes back to religious attribution, something I covered all the way back in the first visit of Emberdale. It may or may not have harmed, but the people just put way too much faith in things that simply couldn't have cared less about them. Parts of them may have aided them, but assuming an intention behind it, like a goodwill behind the wind that blows in the Aeolus Vale, was never more than wild speculation. The only exception is of course the water spirit. There can be one good apple in a messed up bunch. She actually protected people before. She lent you her powers throughout the game. And now with her guidance all the spirits are forced into action. They combine their powers to bring back all the sealed locations. Even if not all the people who are sealed away, like the inhabitants of Hereday who will still be missing, and they confront the imposter and they drag Orgodemir out of his disguise. They're nowhere near strong enough to fight him though. That job is yours.